Some might suggest the first SUV was the Suburban, but originally a Suburban was just another name for a station wagon. Typically a steel wagon, but not necessarily, a term that was used by manufacturers well into the 1970s. At GM, the Suburban was more specifically a light truck-based wagon, which is to say a taller wagon, dating back to 1935. Keep in mind that at the time, cars and pickups were still mechanically and stylistically the same thing, but light trucks tended to have a taller cab, and this was hardly the first truck-based wagon, with the concept going back to the earliest days of the automobile. So even though the SUV wasn't a thing, the tall station wagon certainly was, and the Suburban didn't really transition from body style to distinct model until around 1973. At the beginning of World War II, the U.S. military needed a general-purpose field vehicle, lightweight, durable, and with a high degree of off-road capability. Based on the Bantam Blitz buggy, and built by both Ford and Willys for the war effort, these vehicles became known as Jeeps. After the war ended, Willys continued to manufacture it as the Civilian Jeep, or CJ, and it would lead to many small off-road vehicles, from the Series 1 Land Rover to the Toyota Land Cruiser, as well as many others. And if you wanted a Jeep-based four-wheel drive station wagon, Willys would sell you one of those as well. Dodge also continued its military off-road vehicle, the Power Wagon, as both a pickup and a wagon, as a commercial vehicle. Other truck-based wagons were still available, of course, but the trend was towards windowless panel vans. And if you wanted four-wheel drive, for most of them you had to install a conversion kit. This would soon start to change, and by the early 1960s, four-wheel drive was a typical option. Not only would you have large pickup-based wagons such as the Jeep Wagoneer, International Travelall, and Chevy and GMC Suburbans, the small off-road segment was also expanding to include things like the International Scout and the Ford Bronco. And these were getting enough attention that in 1969, GM separated the short-wheelbase two-door Suburban as a separate model called the Blazer at Chevrolet and the Jimmy at GMC. Soon, Jeep would make a two-door version of the Wagoneer as the Cherokee, but instead of being advertised as a wagon like its competitors, Jeep called it a sport utility vehicle. Technically, the first SUV. Chrysler entered the segment the same year with the Dodge Ram Charger and Plymouth Trail Duster. And let's not forget the bigger Scout II. Even the small Bronco would become based on the F-150 for 1978. Then Jeep developed the first all-wheel drive, or full-time four-wheel drive system, and put it on the market under the AMC Hornet as the AMC Eagle, which some consider to be the first crossover SUV, which would lead to a downsized Wagoneer for 1983, followed by the Cherokee the following year, while the old Wagoneer became the Grand Wagoneer. 1983 would also see the compact S10 Blazer and S15 Jimmy, as well as the Ford Bronco II, and the Toyota 4Runner and Nissan Pathfinder would soon follow. The Isuzu Trooper and Mitsubishi Montero were also early Japanese SUVs in the U.S. market, but they were not exactly compact, more like a poor man's Range Rover. The Toyota Land Cruiser had gone a similar direction by this point, but you could still get a traditional Jeep-like vehicle. The civilian Jeep CJ had become the Jeep Wrangler, Land Rover had the Defender 90, and the Suzuki Jimny had arrived in the U.S. as the Samurai. Daihatsu even offered the Rocky in the U.S. for a period. But for the less serious off-roader, the Toyota Corolla All-Track would evolve into the RAV4 for 1994, taking the tall station wagon into the realm of the crossover. And about the same time, the 10-year-old military, high-mobility, multi-purpose wheeled vehicle would be adapted for civilian use as the Hummer, the H1 specifically, as the H2 and H3 would just be modified versions of existing GM trucks. The Dodge Ram Charger, Chevy Blazer, and Ford Bronco would all go away, and truck-based SUVs were once again basically just wagons. Isuzu stopped selling cars to focus just on SUVs in 1993, although they were only able to survive another dozen years or so in the US. But sales in the segment continued to grow, and SUVs began to expand into performance and luxury segments, even on the extreme high end. By 2015, SUVs were outselling cars, and by 2019, controlling 2/3 of the market. At this point, many major manufacturers are offering half a dozen SUVs or more, while car models have all but disappeared. But one could argue that what we call SUVs today are really three different vehicles. The truck-based wagons that coined the phrase, even if the two-door versions that added sport to the name are gone, the general-purpose off-road vehicles that were once referred to as Jeeps, before Jeep was a brand, and the tall station wagons that dominate the market today and go back to the beginning of the automobile industry. Presumably, the appeal of a dressed-up farm truck or tall station wagon is more than just a need to feel butch, because who wouldn't want to pay more for a slower, worse-handling, less economical vehicle with a higher insurance premium just for a commanding view of the road? Cargo space, passenger space, towing capacity, and all-wheel drive come to mind as likely sales points. Not exactly the things enthusiasts typically drool over, and it's not like those features haven't been offered on cars. But what goes around comes around, and who knows what the next trend will be. The market suggests lower SUVs, making one wonder at what point they will once again be considered just wagons. But as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.